I kissed him like my life depended on it, knowing nothing about him except how his hands felt on my skin. 24 hours later, I walked into that courtroom and there he was, not just any man, but the judge who would decide my client's fate. Our eyes met across the mahogany bench and I knew everything was about to get impossibly complicated. I'm going to tell you about the night everything changed, about the moment I realized that some connections transcend logic, professionalism, and every boundary you've carefully constructed. About the kiss that shouldn't have happened in a crowded bar on a Friday night. About crossing lines I swore I'd never cross, not as a lawyer, not as a woman who prides herself on control. About falling for someone when the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. And about the choice that forced me to decide between my career and something that felt like destiny. Maybe you know the feeling, when someone walks into a room and suddenly the air changes, becomes electric and charged, when a simple touch feels like lightning through your entire body, waking up parts of yourself you'd forgotten existed, when you know something is forbidden, dangerous even, but your heart doesn't care about consequences. When logic and desire go to war, and desire starts winning battle after battle. If you've ever felt that pull, that magnetic force that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself, then you'll understand this story. This isn't just a love story. It's about the moment you have to choose between what's safe and what sets you on fire. About risking everything, your reputation, your career, your carefully planned future, for something that might be temporary but feels eternal. About learning that the heart wants what it wants, consequences be damned. About discovering that some connections are worth the chaos they bring, the upheaval, the complete reorganization of everything you thought mattered. By the end of this story, you'll understand how quickly everything can change with one look, one touch, one impossibly perfect kiss. You'll see the exact moment I knew there was no going back, when crossing that line became inevitable. You'll learn the 3 signs I missed that we were headed here all along, the universe leaving breadcrumbs I was too scared to follow. And you'll understand why, despite everything that came after, I'd do it all over again. Because some people come into your life like a storm, and you're never the same after they pass through. Have you ever felt that undeniable pull towards someone? That chemistry that logic can't explain? If stories about forbidden passion and finding yourself through love move you, hit subscribe. There's a new romantic story every night. This story starts 6 months ago when we were strangers in the same city, when I still believed I had complete control over my own heart, my choices, my destiny. When I thought attraction was something you could just decide against, compartmentalize, ignore, until it went away. I was wrong about everything. About control, about desire, about what it means when you meet someone who sees straight through every wall you've built. And the moment I realized it, that's where this story truly begins. So let me take you back. To the first time our eyes met across that crowded bar on a random Friday night. To the electric tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt like a physical force. To the slow burn that turned into wildfire faster than either of us could have anticipated. To the night everything we'd been avoiding finally caught up with us, and we stopped running. I knew better. We both did. But knowing better and being able to stop are 2 very different things. The bar was too crowded, the music too loud, and I almost didn't go. My best friend Maya had dragged me out after a brutal week of depositions and court filings. I'd been working 70-hour weeks on the Henderson case, barely sleeping, living on coffee and determination. All I wanted was my couch, a glass of wine, and silence. But Maya insisted I needed to remember what it felt like to be a woman, not just a lawyer. So there I was, in a dress I hadn't worn in months, feeling exposed and slightly ridiculous. That's when I saw him. Not saw him, felt him like a shift in atmospheric pressure before a storm. He was standing near the bar, talking to someone I didn't bother to notice. Tall dark hair slightly disheveled, wearing a charcoal suit with the tie loosened and top button undone. There was something about the way he held himself. Confident but not arrogant, powerful but relaxed. My breath caught without permission, my body responding before my mind could shut it down. His eyes found mine across the room. The world didn't stop, that's a cliché, but everything else became background noise. Those eyes were dark, intense, holding mine with a directness that made my pulse stutter. I should have looked away. Professional women don't stare at strangers in bars like they're drowning, and he's oxygen. But I couldn't. Something in his gaze said he felt it too, this inexplicable pull that made no logical sense. I forced myself to turn back to Maya, to pretend my hands weren't trembling. She was talking about her latest dating disaster, but I couldn't focus on the words. Every cell in my body was aware of him, tracking his presence like a compass finding north. This was ridiculous. I was 32 years old, a senior associate at a prestigious firm, not some teenager with a crush. I didn't do irrational attraction. You okay? Maya asked, following my previous line of sight. Oh, he's gorgeous. And he's looking at you. She grinned, that mischievous look I knew too well. Go talk to him. I shook my head immediately. I don't do that. Do what? Talk to attractive men. Soph, when's the last time you let yourself feel something that wasn't case-related stress? She had a point, not that I'd admit it. I tried to ignore him. I really did. I focused on my drink, on Maya's stories, on the music, but my body betrayed me, hyper-aware of every movement he made. When he laughed at something his companion said, I felt it in my chest. When he ran a hand through his hair, my fingers tingled. This was chemistry, pure and simple, the kind scientists could probably measure if they had the right equipment. Then he started walking toward me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Maya saw it too, her eyes widening before she conveniently remembered she needed to check her phone outside. Traitor. He moved through the crowd with purpose, his gaze never leaving mine, and I couldn't have moved if I'd wanted to. Every step closer made the air thinner, made breathing harder. He stopped in front of me close enough that I caught his scent, cedar and something crisp like winter air. I'm not usually this forward, he said, his voice low and warm, but I've been watching you for the past 20 minutes trying to convince myself not to come over here. His honesty disarmed me completely. How's that working out? I managed, surprised my voice sounded steady. He smiled and it transformed his entire face. Clearly not well. There was something in the way he looked at me, like he saw past the lawyer armor straight to the woman underneath. I'm Ethan, he offered, not extending his hand, maybe sensing that touching right now would be too much. Sophia, I replied, and I should tell you I don't usually do this either. Do what? He asked, echoing my earlier question. Let strange men approach me in bars. Talk to people I don't know. Feel like the entire room has disappeared and it's just... I trailed off, realizing I was saying too much. Just us? He finished softly. The way he said it made my stomach flip. Yes, exactly that. We talked for hours, or maybe minutes. Time became elastic, meaningless. He was intelligent, funny in unexpected ways, asking questions that made me think. We discussed everything and nothing. Books, travel, the absurdity of modern dating, our shared hatred of cilantro. Never once did we discuss what we did for a living, as if we both wanted to exist outside our professional identities. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this present, this alive. His hand brushed mine on the bar, and electricity shot up my arm. Neither of us moved away. His fingers slowly, deliberately intertwined with mine. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. This is crazy, I whispered. I don't know you. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers down my spine. I know, he said. But it doesn't feel crazy, does it? No, it felt inevitable, like we'd been circling each other for years and finally crashed into orbit. Maya eventually returned, giving me a look that said she knew exactly what was happening. I'm heading out, she announced too innocently. You good? It was a question with layers. Was I good staying here with this stranger? Was I good with whatever was clearly brewing between us? I looked at Ethan, at the way the dim bar lighting played across his features, at the heat in his eyes that promised things I hadn't let myself want in so long. Yeah, I told her. I'm good. Some people you meet and immediately know will change everything. The night deepened around us, the crowd thinning, but we stayed. We moved to a quieter corner, a booth where the music was muted, and we could hear each other without shouting. Ethan sat across from me initially, but somehow as the conversation flowed, we migrated closer. His arm stretched along the back of the booth behind me, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt his warmth. Every accidental brush of his fingers against my shoulder sent sparks through my nervous system. Tell me something true, he said suddenly, his voice dropping an octave. Something you don't usually share. I should have deflected. I was good at deflection, at keeping people at arm's length. But something about the intimacy of the moment, the way he looked at me like my answer actually mattered, made me want to be honest. I'm tired of being careful, I admitted. I've spent so long building this perfect professional life that I forgot what it feels like to just feel. His eyes darkened. I know that exhaustion, that weight of always being in control. You do? I asked, genuinely curious. He nodded, shifting slightly closer. I spend my days making decisions that affect people's lives. Everything has to be measured, rational, fair. There's no room for impulse. The way he said it made me wonder what he did, but I didn't ask. This space we'd created felt separate from reality, and I didn't want to break the spell. And what do you want to do? If you could be impulsive right now. The question hung between us, loaded with possibility. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. I think you know, he said quietly. My breath hitched. I did know. I could feel it in the tension thrumming between us, in the way the air felt charged and heavy. This is probably a terrible idea, I said, even as I leaned slightly toward him. Probably, he agreed, his hand moving from the booth to my face, fingers feathering along my jawline. But I stopped caring about terrible ideas the moment you looked at me across this bar. His touch was gentle, reverent, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. My eyes fluttered closed as his thumb traced my cheekbone, learning the geography of my face. Sophia, he murmured, and hearing my name in his voice did something to me, made me feel simultaneously fragile and powerful. We don't have to. I want to, I interrupted, opening my eyes to meet his. I want to stop being careful just for tonight. The space between us became microscopic. I could count his eyelashes, see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, feel his breath on my lips. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. His other hand found my waist, steadying me, anchoring us both. Are you sure? He asked, giving me one last chance to pull back. Instead, I closed the final distance, pressing my lips to his in answer. The world tilted. His mouth was warm, firm, tasting of whiskey and something uniquely him. The kiss started soft, exploratory, like a question being asked. Then I responded, my fingers threading through his hair, and something broke open between us. He pulled me closer, deepening the kiss until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't remember why I'd ever thought careful was better than this. This feeling of free-falling and knowing someone would catch you. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Come home with me, he whispered. It wasn't a demand, but an invitation, one I could refuse without consequence. I should have said no. I should have exchanged numbers, planned a proper date, taken things slow like a rational adult. Instead, I heard myself say yes. Sometimes the almost is more powerful than the kiss itself. But sometimes the kiss is just the beginning. His apartment was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights sprawled below us, a carpet of illumination that made the space feel suspended between earth and sky. This is beautiful, I said, moving toward the windows. He came up behind me, not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat of his body. I like the height. Makes everything else feel distant, manageable. I turned to face him, and suddenly the careful distance we'd maintained in the taxi ride over evaporated. His hands cupped my face, and he kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, like we had all the time in the world. My back pressed against the cool glass, his body aligned with mine, and I gasped at the contact. You're sure? He asked again, always giving me an out. Stop asking, I replied, pulling him back to me. We stumbled through his apartment, mouths never fully breaking apart, hands exploring. His jacket hit the floor, then my purse, a trail of discarded items marking our path. He lifted me, my legs wrapping around his waist instinctively, and carried me to his bedroom. The city lights filtered through sheer curtains, painting everything in silver and shadow. He laid me on his bed like I was something sacred, something to be cherished. You're beautiful, he breathed, his hands tracing the curves of my body through my dress. I arched into his touch, wanting more, wanting everything. He unzipped my dress slowly, his lips following the path of the descending zipper, kissing each new inch of exposed skin. My breath came in short gasps, my fingers tangling in his hair. Ethan, I moaned, and his name on my lips seemed to undo something in him. Clothes disappeared between kisses and whispered encouragements. His body was magnificent, strong, lean, every muscle defined. I traced the planes of his chest with reverent hands, learning him, memorizing every line and angle. He shuddered under my touch, his control fraying. "God, Sophia," he groaned. "What are you doing to me?" "The same thing you're doing to me," I replied, making me forget why this is complicated. Time lost meaning as we explored each other with aching slowness. Every touch was electric, every kiss a revelation. He was attentive, intuitive, reading my body's responses like a language only he understood. When he whispered my name, it sounded like prayer. When I gasped his, it was surrender. We moved together in perfect rhythm, discovering new ways to say everything words couldn't express. The night blurred into sensation, whispered promises, tangled limbs, the sliding of skin on skin. We fell into each other completely, the rest of the world ceasing to exist. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with our heartbeats slowly returning to normal, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just physical. This connection, this undeniable chemistry, it was something more. Something that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Attraction doesn't ask permission, it just takes over. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. I woke to find Ethan watching me, his hand gently stroking my hair. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," I replied, suddenly self-conscious in the harsh reality of daylight. What had we done? I didn't know this man. I'd just spent the night with a complete stranger, acting completely out of character. "Regrets?" he asked, reading my expression. I considered lying, but something about him made me want to be honest. "I don't know yet. I don't usually do this," he smiled, pulling me closer. "You mentioned that. Multiple times, actually." There was no judgment in his voice, only affection. "For what it's worth, I don't either. This is unexpected." Unexpected was an understatement. It was revolutionary, earth-shifting, completely unprecedented in my carefully ordered life. We stayed in bed talking as the sun rose higher, learning pieces of each other we'd skipped over in our rush the night before. He loved hiking, hated mornings, had a weakness for old movies. I told him about my love of true crime podcasts, my inability to cook anything beyond pasta, my dream of traveling through Italy someday. We laughed, we touched. We existed in this perfect bubble where reality hadn't yet intruded. "I should probably go," I said eventually, though I didn't move. He tightened his arms around me. "Or you could stay. We could order breakfast, spend the day together." It was tempting, so tempting. But reality was knocking, insistent. I had work Monday morning, a life to get back to. "I can't," I said reluctantly. "But maybe. Could I see you again?" His smile was answer enough. "Definitely. Tonight, dinner?" We exchanged numbers, and I couldn't stop grinning as I typed his name into my phone. This felt real, substantial, like the beginning of something rather than a one-time thing. He kissed me goodbye at his door, long and deep, and I left floating. The city looked different in daylight, brighter, more alive, filled with possibility. I couldn't wait to tell Maya. I couldn't wait to see him again. The weekend passed in a blur of text messages. Good morning texts that made me smile into my coffee. Random thoughts he wanted to share. Photos of things that reminded him of our conversation. We talked about everything, the conversation flowing as easily digitally as it had in person. I caught myself checking my phone constantly, grinning at his name on my screen. This was what people meant when they talked about chemistry, about connection, about meeting someone who just fit Sunday night. He called instead of texting. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, his voice warm through the phone. "I keep replaying Friday night." "Just Friday?" I teased. "Because I seem to remember Saturday morning being pretty memorable too." His laugh was low, intimate. "Saturday morning was incredible." "You're incredible." Heat flooded my cheeks. "I have court tomorrow. A big case I've been working on for months." "Kick ass," he said simply. "That's what you do, isn't it?" I smiled. He didn't even know what I did, yet somehow he saw me clearly. The most dangerous attraction is when the mind catches up to the body. Monday morning arrived with a knot of anticipation in my stomach. The Henderson case was going to trial finally, after months of preparation. My client was nervous, but I'd built an airtight defense. I dressed in my most confident suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, and armor myself with red lipstick. I was ready. I arrived at the courthouse early, going over my notes one final time in the hallway. All rise. The Honorable Judge Ethan Cole presiding. My head snapped up. No, it couldn't be. But it was. Walking into the courtroom in black robes, commanding and authoritative, was Ethan. My Ethan. The man whose bed I'd been in 3 nights ago. The man whose body I knew intimately. The man I was supposed to have dinner with tonight. His eyes found mine, and I watched the exact moment recognition hit. His jaw clenched, and something like shock and horror flashed across his face. The room spun. This couldn't be happening. Of all the judges in the city, in the state, how was he presiding over my case? My biggest case, the case that could make my career. I stood frozen as the prosecutor approached the bench, as my client touched my arm asking if I was okay, as the entire courtroom waited for proceedings to begin. Judge Cole Ethan composed himself with visible effort. "Counsel, approach," he said, his voice carefully neutral. My legs somehow carried me forward. Up close I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. The prosecutor, Jennifer Chen, looked between us with obvious curiosity. "Your Honor," she began, but Ethan held up a hand. "Before we proceed, I need to make something clear." His eyes met mine, and in them I saw regret, conflict, and something that looked like longing. "I believe there may be a conflict of interest that requires addressing." My heart stopped. Was he going to tell the entire courtroom we'd slept together? My career would be over. The case would be thrown out. My client would suffer. "Your Honor," I said quickly, "I don't believe—" "Ms. Mitchell," he interrupted, his formal use of my last name like a knife. "We both know there's a complication here." The prosecutor's interest visibly peaked. This was a disaster unfolding in slow motion. "Chambers, now, both of you," Ethan commanded, standing abruptly. We followed him through the door behind the bench into his private office. The moment the door closed, the careful judicial mask cracked. "Sophia," he breathed, and hearing my first name in his voice again hurt. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were the attorney on this case. I didn't know you were a judge," I shot back, my mind racing. "You never said—" "We specifically didn't talk about work," he reminded me, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture. God, this is a mess. Jennifer Chen stood silently, clearly calculating what this meant for her case. "Perhaps someone should explain what's happening," she suggested with barely concealed glee. Ethan looked at me, a question in his eyes. I shook my head fractionally. "Not everything. Not the full truth. Judge Cole and I met socially this weekend," I said carefully. "Briefly. At a bar. It was technically true if you defined briefly loosely, and met as the world's biggest understatement." Ethan nodded, playing along. "It was a chance encounter. We didn't discuss the case or even realize the connection until this moment." Chen frowned, clearly disappointed there wasn't more scandal. "So you're acquaintances?" "Barely," I lied, the word tasting bitter. "We spoke for maybe 20 minutes. The truth that we'd spent hours talking, that I knew how he tasted, that I'd fallen asleep in his arms, remained unspoken but heavy in the room. Ethan's jaw worked, and I saw the moment he made his decision. "I don't believe it rises to the level requiring recusal," he said formally. "Our interaction was minimal and had nothing to do with this case. However, to maintain absolute propriety, I'll have the court reporter note the disclosure for the record. If either counsel wishes to object, now is the time." Chen considered, then shook her head. "No objection from the prosecution, Your Honor." All eyes turned to me. "Object, and I'd draw more attention to whatever this was. Don't object, and I'd have to spend the next weeks across from the man I couldn't stop thinking about, pretending he was a stranger." "No objection," I whispered. "Sometimes the bravest thing is letting yourself feel, but sometimes the most necessary thing is shutting those feelings down completely." The trial began, and I forced myself into lawyer mode. Every time I stood to object or question a witness, I felt Ethan's, Judge Cole's, eyes on me. When he ruled in my favor, I wondered if anyone could see the conflict in his expression. When he ruled against me, I felt it like a rejection, even though I knew he was just doing his job. The professional distance we maintained was excruciating. During the lunch recess, my phone buzzed. A text from him. "We need to talk. Not about the case. About us." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. There was no us anymore. There couldn't be. Not while he was presiding over my case. Not when one wrong move could ruin everything I'd worked for. But God, I wanted there to be an us. I wanted to go back to Friday night when he was just Ethan, and I was just Sophia and nothing was complicated. Can't, I texted back. You know we can't. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. After the trial? He wrote. I didn't answer. What happened after the trial? Did we just pick up where we left off? Pretend that this professional collision hadn't happened? Did we ignore the way my hands shook every time he spoke? Did we forget that I now had to maintain judicial decorum with a man who'd whispered my name like a prayer? The afternoon session was torture. I presented my opening arguments, my voice strong and confident despite the churning in my gut. Ethan watched from the bench, his expression unreadable, and I hated that I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Was he impressed by my legal strategy? Frustrated by the situation, regretting Friday night? The not knowing was almost worse than the separation itself. Jennifer Chen was sharp, experienced, and clearly smelled blood in the water. She pushed harder than she might have otherwise, perhaps sensing my distraction. During a sidebar, she whispered, "Whatever's going on between you and Judge Cole, don't let it cost your client the case." My blood ran cold. "There's nothing going on," she smirked. "Sure, and I'm not thinking about how to use this to my advantage." It was a warning and a threat rolled into one. That night, I lay in bed unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the day. The shock in Ethan's eyes when he first saw me. The careful distance we maintained. The text he sent that I couldn't answer. I pulled up our previous messages, reading through our flirty exchanges from the weekend. They felt like artifacts from another lifetime, evidence of a connection that now seemed impossible to maintain. My phone rang. Ethan. I stared at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. This was a terrible idea. Judges and lawyers couldn't have personal relationships, especially not while actively in trial together. But I couldn't not answer. "Hello?" My voice came out breathier than I intended. "I know I shouldn't be calling," he said immediately. "I know this breaks every rule, but I can't stop thinking about you, Sophia. I can't pretend Friday night didn't happen. We have to," I insisted, even as my heart rebelled. "The trial will be over eventually. And then?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. Love is rarely convenient, and the real kind never is. The trial continued for 3 agonizing weeks. 3 weeks of maintaining professional distance. 3 weeks of careful, neutral exchanges in the courtroom. 3 weeks of my body responding every time I heard his voice. I'd never been so aware of another person's presence, never had to work so hard to hide my reactions. Every ruling he made, I had to analyze professionally while my heart asked different questions. Late nights in my office became routine as I prepared for each day's proceedings. My paralegal, James, noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "Zayat's pushing too hard," he said gently. "The case is going well. Henderson's testimony was solid, and Chen's struggling to poke holes in our timeline. He was right. Objectively, we were winning. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something far more important. Ethan's texts became less frequent, then stopped entirely. The silence hurt more than I expected. I'd check my phone obsessively, hoping for a message that never came. He was respecting the boundaries the situation demanded, and I hated him for it even as I understood the necessity. In court, his mask never slipped. He was professional, fair, giving nothing away. Sometimes I caught him looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Longing. Regret? Resignation? The prosecution rested their case, and it was our turn to present our defense. I stood before the bench, acutely aware of Ethan's presence just feet away. "Your Honor, the defense calls Michael Henderson." My client took the stand and I guided him through his testimony with practiced ease. He was believable, sympathetic, genuine. I could feel the jury responding. This was what I did best, telling a compelling story, creating reasonable doubt. During cross-examination, Chen went hard, trying to rattle Henderson. "Objection," I called out sharply, badgering the witness. Ethan's eyes met mine briefly before he nodded. "Sustained. Ms. Chen, rephrase your question." That brief moment of eye contact sent a jolt through me. In his gaze, I saw everything we weren't saying, the frustration, the desire, the impossibility of this situation. Then he looked away and the moment vanished. The trial moved toward closing arguments. I spent an entire weekend crafting mine, wanting it to be perfect. Not just because this case was important for my career, but because some irrational part of me wanted Ethan to see how good I was at what I did. I wanted him to be impressed, proud, even as I knew it was ridiculous to want those things from the judge presiding over my case. Monday morning, I delivered my closing. I spoke about reasonable doubt, about the prosecution's failure to prove their case beyond certainty, about the life that hung in the balance. My voice rang through the courtroom with passion and conviction. When I sat down, my hands were shaking. Ethan's expression was carefully neutral, but I saw his fingers tighten on his gavel. He felt something. I just didn't know what. Sometimes the bravest thing is letting yourself feel, but sometimes the most terrifying thing is wondering if someone else feels it too. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 days of excruciating limbo where I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely function, not just because of the verdict, but because once the trial ended, I'd have to make a decision. Ethan had asked, "And then?" I hadn't answered because I didn't know. Could we really go back? Could we start something after this complicated, painful distance? Did I even want to risk it? Maya cornered me at my apartment. "You look like hell, and before you blame it on trial stress, I know there's more to this. You've been different since that night at the bar." I'd never told her about Ethan being the judge. The conflict of interest was too dangerous to share. "It's complicated," I said weakly. "When is it not?" she countered. "Soph, whatever's happening, you can't keep running from things that scare you." Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Jury's back." My stomach dropped. This was it, the culmination of months of work, weeks of tension, and 3 weeks of forced distance from a man I couldn't stop thinking about. I dressed carefully, armor myself in confidence I didn't feel, and headed to the courthouse. In the hallway, I saw Ethan, Judge Cole, entering from the opposite direction. Our eyes met briefly. He mouthed something that looked like good luck, but it happened so fast I might have imagined it. "All rise." We stood as Ethan entered. He looked tired, I realized. The trial had worn on him, too. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" he asked formally. The 4 persons stood. "We have, Your Honor." My client gripped my hand under the table. I squeezed back, trying to project confidence. "On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant not guilty." Relief crashed through me, so powerful I almost swayed. We'd won. Henderson was free. All the work, all the sleepless nights, all the careful preparation had paid off. The courtroom erupted in muted celebration. Henderson hugged me, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you." I smiled, accepting congratulations from my colleagues, but my eyes kept drifting to the bench. Ethan was watching me, and for the first time in 3 weeks he wasn't hiding his expression, pride, warmth, and something that looked like longing. Then he stood. "Court is adjourned," he said, banging the gavel. I gathered my materials slowly, deliberately, as the courtroom emptied. Jennifer Chen approached, extending her hand. "Well fought. You're good at this." I accepted the handshake, appreciating the professional respect despite our adversarial roles. When I finally looked up, Ethan was gone, disappeared into his chambers. My heart sank. Maybe that was it. Maybe the trial ending didn't change anything. Maybe— "Ms. Mitchell?" The court clerk approached. "Judge Cole requests to see you in chambers." My pulse jumped. This was against protocol. Judges didn't request private meetings with attorneys after verdicts. "Is something wrong?" I asked carefully. She smiled slightly. "I don't think so. I think. Just go." Her tone suggested she knew more than she was saying. True intimacy is when bodies and souls speak the same language. But what language do you speak when words have been forbidden for weeks? I stood outside his chamber door, heart pounding. This was it, the moment where we either acknowledged everything or pretended. Friday night was just a random encounter that meant nothing. I knocked, my knuckles barely making sound. "Come in," his voice called, and even through the door it sent shivers through me. I entered to find him standing by the window, tie loosened, robe discarded, looking more like the man from the bar than the judge who'd presided over my trial. "You wanted to see me, Your Honor." I kept my voice formal, professional, even though we were alone. He turned, and the expression on his face was anything but judicial. Don't call me that, not now. Not when we're finally—" He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching me. Sophia, this trial was the longest 3 weeks of my life. Having to sit there, watching you, being near you, but not being able to— I know, I interrupted. I know because it was the same for me. Every day having to pretend you were just a judge, that we didn't— I couldn't finish. The memories of that night, that perfect night before everything got complicated, flooded back. His hands on my skin, his lips on mine. The way he'd whispered my name in the darkness. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you what I did. I'm sorry this got so complicated. But I'm not sorry for Friday night. I'll never be sorry for that." My breath caught. "We can't do this." "You're a judge. I'm a lawyer. The ethics— The trial is over," he reminded me. "There's no case between us anymore. No conflict, but there will be others. I practice in this courthouse. You preside here. Eventually then I'll recuse myself," he said simply. "Every time. Any case you're on. I don't care. Sophia, I know this is complicated. I know it breaks every rule about how these things are supposed to go. But I can't walk away from this. From you." He cupped my face in his hands, the same gesture from the bar, and I melted. "I've thought about you every day for 3 weeks. Every night. I've relived every conversation, every touch, every moment of that perfect night. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But this feels real. You feel real. And I don't want to let that go without at least trying." His honesty undid me. All the walls I'd built, all the professional distance I'd maintained, crumbled. "I'm scared," I admitted, "of what people will say, of the ethics implications, of how intense this feels after just one night." "Me too," he said, terrified. "But I'm more scared of wondering what if, of letting you walk out that door and never knowing if this could have been something extraordinary." His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I leaned into the touch I'd been craving for weeks. "Dinner?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Like we planned? 3 weeks late?" He smiled, that transformative smile that had first caught me. "Dinner and talking, and figuring out how two complicated people in complicated positions make this work. It won't be easy," I warned. "The best things never are," he replied. Then he leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His lips met mine, and it was like coming home after a long journey. All the tension of the past weeks dissolved into relief and desire. I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding in, the longing, the frustration, the undeniable connection. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you walked into my courtroom." "I'm glad you waited until the verdict," I said with a breathless laugh. He grinned, barely. "You have no idea how hard it was not to just throw everything aside and—" I kissed him again, cutting off whatever he was going to say. Love is rarely convenient, and the real kind never is. But sometimes it's worth every complication. We left the courthouse separately, maintaining appearances, and met at a small Italian restaurant on the edge of town. Away from the legal district, away from colleagues and gossip. Just two people finally able to be themselves. Ethan waited for me in a corner booth, and the smile that lit his face when he saw me made my heart skip. "Hi," he said as I slid in across from him. "Hi," I echoed, suddenly feeling shy after everything we'd been through. Dinner was easy in a way the trial weeks had never been. We talked about everything. Our childhoods, our paths to law, the cases that haunted us, the moments that defined us. He told me about his father, also a judge, and the weight of that legacy. I shared my fear of never being enough, of always having to prove myself in a male-dominated field. The conversation flowed like it had that first night, intimate and genuine. "I need you to know," Ethan said seriously, setting down his wine. "I'll never preside over another one of your cases. I've already spoken to the chief judge about a permanent recusal for any case involving you or your firm." The sacrifice inherent in that statement wasn't lost on me. "That's going to raise questions," I pointed out. "People will wonder why." "Let them," he said firmly. "My integrity as a judge means everything to me. But so does this, so do you. If we're going to do this, we do it right, transparent, ethical, no hidden relationships, no conflicts." His commitment was both reassuring and daunting. This wasn't a casual fling he was proposing. This was a real relationship, with all the complications that entailed. "What do people say?" I asked. "At the courthouse? About us?" He shrugged. "Nothing yet. Once word gets out that I've recused myself permanently from cases involving you, there will be speculation. But we'll handle it, together. The word together settled something in my chest. We stayed at the restaurant until closing, reluctant to end the evening. When we finally left, Ethan took my hand as we walked to where I'd parked. The simple gesture felt monumental, after weeks of forced distance. "Come home with me?" he asked, echoing his invitation from 3 weeks ago. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something made me pause. I want to take this slower this time, I admitted. Last time we jumped straight to physical, and then everything got complicated before we had a chance to build anything real. He looked disappointed but understanding. "You're right. I've missed you." "I've missed you too," I assured him. "But let's do this right. Dates, conversations, learning each other outside of a courtroom or a bedroom." He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me in an embrace that felt like safety and promise. "Okay, we'll take it slow. But Sophia? Yeah?" I looked up at him. "I'm falling for you. I need you to know that. This isn't casual for me." My heart stuttered. It was too soon for words like that. We barely knew each other. Except I was falling too. Against all logic, against all sense. I was falling for this man who'd entered my life like a storm. "I'm falling too," I whispered. "And it terrifies me." "Good," he said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "The best things should be a little terrifying. Sometimes the scariest words are also the truest. I can't stop thinking about you. And sometimes the bravest thing is admitting you can't stop thinking about them either." The next few months were a study in balance. We took things slowly, learning each other without the pressure of a trial hanging over us. Real dates, museums, concerts, long walks through the city. Real conversations about hopes and fears in the future. Real moments of vulnerability and connection. We were building something solid, something that could weather the inevitable challenges. The legal community eventually learned about us, and reactions were mixed. Some colleagues congratulated me. Others whispered about impropriety, about whether our relationship had influenced the Henderson verdict. I learned to ignore the gossip, to focus on the truth. That Ethan's decision to recuse himself from all my cases demonstrated his commitment to judicial ethics, not a compromise of them. My career didn't suffer like I'd feared. If anything, the Henderson case had elevated my reputation. I was making senior partner track, handling bigger cases, building the career I'd always wanted. And at the end of long days, I had someone who understood the pressure, the stakes, the weight of carrying others' fates in your hands. Ethan got it in a way no one else could. We moved in together after 6 months, a decision that felt simultaneously rushed and inevitable. His warehouse apartment became ours, filled with my books and his records and the life we were building together. Mornings were coffee and shared sections of the newspaper. Evenings were cooking experiments, mostly disasters and laughter. Nights were wrapped in each other, the physical connection as strong as ever but deeper now, rooted in genuine intimacy. "I love you," he said one night, the words casual but loaded with meaning. We were on the couch, my feet in his lap, both reading. I know I probably shouldn't say it yet, that there's some timeline we're supposed to follow, but I love you. I think I've loved you since that first night. I just didn't know it then. I set down my book, my heart expanding until I thought it might burst. "I love you too," I replied. "Even though you're impossible to cook for, and you leave wet towels on the bathroom floor." He laughed, pulling me into his lap. "Even though you work too late and drink terrible wine?" "Hey, my wine is perfectly adequate," I protested. "It's terrible," he insisted, kissing me. "But I love you anyway." These were the moments I treasured, the ordinary ones, the quiet ones, the ones where love existed not in grand gestures, but in acceptance of each other's flaws and quirks. We faced challenges, of course. The legal community could be judgmental and petty. We had to be careful about appearances, about how we conducted ourselves professionally. Sometimes I resented the extra scrutiny, the way our relationship was public property in a way others weren't. But Ethan was steady, patient, reminding me that anything worth having required effort. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," he'd say, "but it's worth it. You're worth it." A year after that first night, we returned to the same bar where we'd met. It had become an anniversary tradition, going back to where it all started. "Remember how terrified you were to talk to me?" Ethan teased, his arm around my shoulders. "I was not terrified," I protested. You were trembling, he reminded me. That was just adrenaline or the cold. Or, he kissed me, cutting off my excuses, you were terrified and brave. And I'm so glad you said yes when Maya dragged you out that night. True passion teaches you who you really are, and I'd learned I was someone brave enough to take risks, someone who could balance career ambitions with genuine connection, someone capable of love that didn't compromise, but complemented everything else I wanted from life. 2 years in, Ethan took me hiking to a spot overlooking the city, the same city that sprawled below his apartment windows, but seen from a different perspective. The fall air was crisp, leaves crunching under our feet, the world painted in golds and reds. We stood at the overlook, his arms wrapped around me from behind, and I felt completely content. This was happiness, simple, uncomplicated, real. Sophia, he said, his voice carrying a nervous edge I rarely heard. I turned in his arms to find him looking at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. These past 2 years have been the best of my life. You've challenged me, surprised me, made me better in every way. You're my best friend, my partner, my everything. He dropped to one knee, pulling a ring box from his pocket. Will you marry me? Time suspended. The logical part of my brain catalogued everything this meant. The further scrutiny, the navigation of being a lawyer married to a judge, the complications. But my heart was screaming yes. Yes, I said, pulling him up to kiss him. Yes, yes, yes. The ring was perfect, elegant, classic, exactly what I would have chosen. We stood there as the sun set over the city, wrapped in each other, and the promise of a future we'd build together. The engagement brought new waves of gossip and attention. Some colleagues questioned the ethics, even though we'd navigated the relationship with scrupulous care. The Judicial Ethics Board formally reviewed our situation and found no conflicts. Ethan's permanent recusal policy and our transparency had insulated us from legitimate concerns. But people would talk. They always did. Let them, Ethan said when I expressed frustration. We know the truth. That's what matters. We planned a small wedding, just close friends and family, nothing ostentatious or public. The ceremony was in a garden, autumn leaves falling like confetti, the air crisp and perfect. When I walked down the aisle and saw Ethan waiting, his eyes full of love and promise, I felt complete. This was my choice, my future, my partner. We'd found each other in the most unlikely way and built something real despite every complication. I, Sophia, take you, Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. I promise to love you in courtrooms and bedrooms, in victory and defeat, in certainty and doubt. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your home. His vows matched mine in emotional weight. I promise to support your dreams while chasing my own, to respect your independence while building our interdependence, to love you not despite our complications, but because of everything we've overcome together. The reception was joyful, full of laughter and dancing and toasts that made us both cry. Maya gave a speech about dragging me to that bar 2 years ago, about knowing the moment she saw me with Ethan that something had shifted. I've never seen her so alive, she said, so willing to take risks, to be vulnerable, to choose love over safety. That's what Ethan gave her, permission to be fully herself. My father, stoic and reserved, shook Ethan's hand and said simply, "Take care of her." "She's fierce but fragile," Ethan replied. "I know, and I will." Our first dance was to a slow jazz standard, our bodies moving together with the familiarity of 2 years of learning each other's rhythms. "Happy?" Ethan murmured against my hair. "Completely," I replied. "You?" "More than I ever imagined possible," he said. That night in the bar, I never could have guessed we'd end up here. But I'm so glad we did. "Me too," I whispered. "Even with all the complications?" "Especially with all the complications. They made this real. They tested us and we passed." He kissed me and the room faded away. It was just us, like it had been that first night, like it would be for all the nights to come. We honeymooned in Italy, the trip I'd mentioned wanting to take that first morning in his bed. We explored Rome, Florence, Venice, eating our weight in pasta and gelato, getting wonderfully lost in ancient streets. Away from courtrooms and scrutiny, we were just Ethan and Sophia, two people deeply in love, building memories to sustain us through whatever challenges lay ahead. "I want to do this forever," I said one evening as we watched the sunset over the Amalfi Coast. "Travel with you, discover new places, build a life that's ours." "We will," he promised. All of it. Everything you want. We'll make it happen together. Returning to reality was harder than I expected. Back to work. Back to the careful navigation of our professional lives. But it was easier now with wedding rings on our fingers and a lifetime commitment made. We were Sophia and Ethan Cole, partners in every sense. I'd kept my last name professionally, but taken his personally. Mitchell Cole, a hyphenated identity that reflected both my independence and our unity. "Whatever works for you," Ethan had said when I'd agonized over the decision. "You're my wife, however you choose to be called." Life settled into a new rhythm. Work was demanding for both of us, but we made time for each other. Date nights, weekend getaways, quiet evenings at home. We talked about the future, about children someday, about growing old together. The future that had seemed so uncertain that first night now stretched ahead, full of possibility. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we hadn't met?" I asked one night. "All the time," Ethan admitted. "And I'm grateful every day that we did. That you said yes to that bar, that you kissed me back, that you took a chance on something uncertain." "Best risk I ever took," I said, kissing him. And it was true. This love, this partnership, this life we'd built, it was worth every complication, every challenge, every moment of doubt. We'd found each other against odds, built something real from one wild night, and created a future neither of us could have imagined. "I love you," I told him. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," he replied. "Always have. Always will." And as we fell asleep wrapped in each other, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Have you ever felt a connection like this? One that changes everything? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them all. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you what it feels like to fall completely, hit subscribe. There's a new romantic journey every night. Because love stories, they never get old. Sometimes they start in unexpected places, face impossible complications, and require more courage than you knew you had. But the best ones, the ones that teach you who you really are and who you're meant to become, those are worth every risk, every challenge, every moment of doubt. Because true passion doesn't just change your life, it transforms your soul.